Hello and welcome back to another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about after a hectic weekend in Orlando. A ton of drama, a ton of controversy via the first short track and night race date of the campaign. And I'll talk about red hot Braeden Bennett right now, the new points leader, back-to-back victories for the 25-year-old. He takes the points lead. We'll definitely get into all his recent dominance as of late. We got to talk a lot about a former champion, Cameron Atwood, in his Orlando radio meltdown. Obviously, a ton of news just dropped within the past 24 hours, 48 hours, about what the next steps between he and CJ Barrimer Racing will be. We also got to talk about the new public enemy number one in the ASCA, Caden Dunham. Oh boy, his performance in the Exalta 100. Ooh, man, we'll get into that as well. And also a big silly season news story that dropped involving the man whose birthday was over the weekend, Will Moon, not returning to Ronnie Wood's Motorsports at the end of the campaign. Where does he end up? Will he go to Cup? Will he stay in Craftsman? We'll have to see on that one. And then Belltown, the next race on the schedule. So back-to-back short tracks. It's going to be fun previewing that action this weekend. And if Belltown's anything like we saw at Orlando, oh boy, I'm going to be in for something special. But first off, we got to shout out the sports premier partner, Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales. You already know. Click that link in bio. Actually, don't click that link in bio. Use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 or more inside the US. If you want to cop a Braeden Bennett replica diecast, he's won the last two races in a row. Head on over to Circle B Diecast / planbsales.com to do that. And then let's also shout out the ASCA's merch shop. You already know if you want to cop some Braeden Bennett gear, maybe some Cameron Atwood gear, even though he might be leaving CJ Barrimer Racing pretty soon. You want to cop, that could become rare soon, especially if he leaves. Well, we'll have to see on that one. You want to cop any of their gear, click that link in bio and head on over to the ASCA's merch shop and use code season12 at checkout to save 30%. And that sale is running through the rest of the campaign. So let's get into it. First off, I will apologize. Running on 5 hours of sleep right now. Like I said, it's been a hectic weekend. Sleep schedule's been all messed up from the first night race dates of the campaign. And so if things sound a little disjointed, now you know why. But for Braeden Bennett, let's talk about him first. So we'll begin with West Virginia. So we talked about that briefly a couple weeks ago. He has that big incident. He takes out Norm Lester. He takes out Lucas Sambear. He gets loose on the restart and just bins it. He lost it on his own, and he called that the worst mistake of his racing career to date. He had a top 5 car that day. He actually took the lead from Greg Healy on the initial start. Healy took it right back. Speaking of Bennett and Healy, they've been the two dominant drivers of the season. They've combined to lead 56% of all laps ran this campaign, which is nuts. Like I said, we'll get into that later. But for Bennett, since what he would call the worst mistake of his career, he won at the Stoneyard the following week, drove from 16th to 1st, no big deal. 16th to 1st at one of the toughest tracks in the ASCA, no biggie. It's only his 5th time there as well in the Cup Series. So very impressive win right there, even though some people can say he stole it. Some can call it a Mickey win, with the drama between Sambear and Ayers and the pick play and all that. Then he comes back Thursday morning, he bins it in Craftsman Series opening practice. Not his fault. Blew right front tire, slams the outside wall. Vicious shot. He hit so hard, he had to go to the hospital for precautionary checks. So he does that, comes back out, Friday night, starting 19, drives his way all the way up to second in 85 laps, has a shot at the win. Michael Racing tried to pull off another pick play. Caden Dunham, though, was having none of it. Like I said, we're going to get to him very much so later in this podcast. But Bennett drives from 19th to second in less than 100 laps, nearly wins that race. So count it. Last two races for him, first and second. And then, of course, under the lights in Orlando, Saturday night. He showed pretty early he had a dominant card. He was kind of holding back. You could tell throughout the opening laps, was kind of being patient, didn't want to force the issue too much. But once he decided to go, you could tell he was stronger than Healy. He turned left right underneath Healy out of turn one and just made the pass seamlessly down the front straightaway into turn two. Healy just didn't really stand much of a chance, and we know how strong he's been here and the entire campaign as a whole thus far. He started on pole position after all, but yeah, Bennett took the lead, drove away, didn't look back, and now it's back-to-back victories on the season, back-to-back victories at Orlando, the first repeat winner in the Cup Series this season, and he's driven from 13th to first in the standings in the last 2 weeks via his wins. Since, like I said, the worst mistake of his career, in his own words, Bennett is averaging a 1.33 finish in his last 3 ASCA starts. That's ridiculous. That's insane, especially when you consider he started outside the top 15 in 2 of those starts. That's actually insane. So Bennett's been red hot as of late, and we've seen it before last season. It's really what kickstarted his run. His sophomore surge was this 3-race stretch last year: the Stoneyard, Orlando, and then Belltown. And he had, because the first 3 races, he was like 22nd in points. He looked awful. And there were, like I said, we went over this briefly last week. Again, real questions on whether or not he was going to even get an extension to come back for this year. There are rumors that Tony Doval could take the seat, but then he turns it around, second at the Stoneyard. He pulls off the win, snaps Toyota's drought in Orlando, then comes back the following week at Belltown, finishes second. And now you look at that 3-race stretch this year. He won the Stoneyard. He won Orlando. Can he win Belltown, a track that he won the most recent race at last year, the season finale? He finished second in the AutoZone 200 a year ago. I think there's a very real possibility Bennett becomes the 3rd driver in the last 4 years to win 3 races in a row. And I think that if he does, it's going to really be the ultimate championship statement, because as it stands, I think the only driver week in and week out that has the pure pace that Bennett has is Greg Healy. Now, it doesn't quite reflect in the point standings. You look at the guys like the Bryn Reynolds and the Colin Wards and the Carson Schmitz and the Randall Woodses that are kind of up there lingering around. But again, they don't have the pure pace that we've seen out of Bennett and Healy. They haven't been leading the laps. Reynolds won a race, but Healy and Bennett have won the last 3 straight. And we know that at short tracks, Bennett and Healy are probably the 2 best in the sport right now. Even at West Virginia, they were battling for the race lead. They're incredibly versatile drivers. They have pretty much the same skill sets. Honestly, Bennett's is kind of a younger version because they both struggle at road courses. And as we saw with Healy, that skill set is good enough to win a championship. In the right equipment, Bennett can manage the high-speed aero tracks. He's great on the short tracks, and everywhere else he just kind of manages things based on his equipment. I think the only real difference is that Healy struggles at the Stoneyard, while Bennett obviously just won there. He's really good there, always has been, which is critical because that's going to come in clutch later on in the campaign. But yeah, for Braeden Bennett, huge victory, takes the points lead, and certainly has established himself as a real deal title contender. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, which is crazy. considering, a couple weeks ago we thought he was having a mediocre season, and now here he is leading the point standings. The fifth different points leader in 5 weeks. Again, the first time that's happened since 2022. And 2022 was a crazy title fight that went all the way down to the wire. This season's kind of shaping up to be the same thing, and really just showing the running order kind of being flipped on its head a bit, with guys like Bennett and Sam Bayer and Healy. Michael White Racing and Snoots Enterprises seem to be the two dominant organizations this year. Who would have seen that one coming? Considering the speed of Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Katie Burrs Racing. But, for Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Katie Burrs Racing, I mean, they still have guys up there in Carson Smith and Colin Ward, young talents as well. So, really promising signs for them. You know that if they can get that equipment right, you'd hope they can get for RWM, they can get Kid and Park and Barrymore up there. And then for Keedy Rose Racing, Diego's kind of been lingering around the top 10. He obviously was inside the top 5 in points, and then he had that big incident with Danny Bradford. To me, it didn't look intentional, that incident. Let's cover it briefly because it was a pretty hot button issue and it did take out the points leader Carson Schmidt. The contact didn't look intentional. It seemed incidental from Orchidi to Bradford. I think he just got tight on corner exit out of turn one and just got up into Bradford, tried to get too much throttle off the corner. And, he had no reason to wreck Bradford. He wasn't racing him for position. Um, and he had a bunch of cars behind him. So he should have known that if he had to check up, he probably was going to get run over, which he ultimately did. I don't think it was intentional. Diego was obviously furious over the radio, but that's Diego. It's just a rare mistake from a 4-time champion, 29-time Cup Series winner. And it does drop him down to 10th in the standings with 2 DNFs on the campaign. Little concerning, I would say, for that drive for 5, but again, it's still early in the campaign. I think he's going to benefit greatly. He's going to be one of those that benefits greatly from this doubleheader at Michigan. We know how good he is at road racing. And then the Windows 300, and then we got Utah, and then what is it? Denver, San Diego. Like, there's a bunch of good tracks coming up for Diego. Notice how I did not include Belltown because he sucks there. But everything else for Diego, he's going to bounce back. He's going to be in the fight. But yeah, so I think that trying to look at who the title contenders are, I think honestly we still can't tell. But like I said, if I had to pick 2 right now who I think have the best shot of fighting for a championship, at Belltown when we come back in a few months in June, I think Bennett and Healy have to be towards the top of the list. They have the most raw pace. They've won the last 3 races. So that's my spiel on the championship. And of course, we're going to talk a lot more about that as the weeks wear on and we continue to learn more and more with these new regulations that have really jumbled things up. And I must say, it's also refreshing because last year we knew by this point it was Todd Kidd versus Diego Urquidy. And Shane Park kind of got up in the mix around this point, but he really wasn't in it yet. It really wasn't until after his victory at Michigan. Um, but yeah, it was Kidd versus Urquidy. We all knew that from 3 races in. This year, there's, I would say, any of the top 10, probably minus Graham Darty, because again, he's a 20-year-old rookie and he just doesn't have the experience. But I would say any one of, not the top 10, but I would say probably the top 6 in the standings could win the championship. And that's just a testament to these new regulations really tightening things up. Actually, screw it. We'll put top 7. Throw Ross Jackson in that category as well. And yeah, I'd say any one of the top 7 could very well win this championship. And it's great. You love to see a title fight this close. And hopefully it stays that way, throughout the remainder of the campaign. But yeah, so now let's move on. Let's discuss Cameron Atwood's Orlando meltdown from one championship conversation to a former champion. And boy, this was obviously a hot button issue. In case you missed it, you probably did hear the meltdown, but in case you missed that as well, let's briefly cover that. So basically, Atwood, I think it's around lap 126 that this happened. The broadcast kind of shifted to him. He was battling with Doug Bowden for the fourth position, a spot that he had over Bowden, but then lost it in the pits. And we talked about Atwood losing the race last week in the pits. He loses another spot in the pits this week, and he's fuming at this point. He's sick of it. He's had a lot of pit crew issues throughout the past few years at CJ Barrera Racing. It seems like they just can never quite get that side of things right. And he basically let his team have it. We said, you guys aren't getting the job done in the pits. Obviously, this is a PG-13 version of what he said because it's not safe for podcasting. But he let his guys have it. Like he said, you're not getting the job done in the pits, man. I can't do with this anymore. And Bob Brady, his crew chief, Ben Brady, correction, his crew chief responding with a quip like, "Hey, it's a team sport, Cameron, calm down." Like, yeah, it's a team sport, but you guys also aren't picking up your load. Like, you have a championship level driver in the prime of his career that wants to win championships. He took a pay cut to come here to win championships, and he has won a title. So, I think Brady's attempt to antagonize Atwood there obviously didn't come across too well. And ironically enough, about 22 or so laps later, Doug Bowden blows up in front of Cameron Atwood. And that spot that he lost in the pits ended up being the reason that he DNF'd. And he didn't talk to the team at all after the race, after the accident, or at all, yesterday. He went straight to his motorhome. He flew straight out of Florida and back. Didn't even go into the race shop yesterday, which normally he does, on Sundays after the race to kind of review the film and get ready for the next week. He didn't go back to the shop. He just spent time with his wife and his family at home. So he was obviously fuming. And CJ Barrymore Racing did make wholesale changes to the number 17 team to please their franchise driver. They ended up firing championship winning crew chief Ben Brady over that incident. They swapped crews between the number 17 team and the number 6 team, Ryan Dixon's team. So they made wholesale changes. They brought in, what is his name, Rupert Townley, the car chief, to now be the interim, basically, man atop the box for Atwood. And I think this was needed. It was definitely needed because Atwood seems like he was at his breaking point. Like, we never hear Cameron Atwood get like that over the radio. It's not like Diego Arquidi where you hear this every week. Like, no, Atwood is calm, cool, collected, level-headed, low-key, laid-back guy. And he's just laid into his team. He aired them boys out. He never does this. So when he's mad, you gotta pay attention. And we saw him on Twitter kind of, I would say passive aggressively vent his frustrations that he was disappointed, that the pay crew cost him the race, and then obviously when they cost him another critical spot and critical track position in Orlando, he lost it. And is he done with CJ Barrymore Racing? The thing is that he's stuck under contract there through 2027. So he's stuck there for at least the rest of this year and the rest of next year. There's no team option like Chris Barrymore that he can use to finagle his way out of that contract. No, they got him locked in. So he's kind of stuck there through his age 31 campaign. 2028, he'll be 32 years of age. Which is tough for Atwood, because he wants to win another title. He's thinking, man, I'm in the prime of my career, the best shape of my life. I'm chasing this championship. Who knows how long my window is going to last when I'm at peak performance? I need, if these guys aren't going to provide me a better surrounding core, then I need to leave. And it is good that the organization made concessions to Atwood because I believe he was in the right here, 100%. Like I said, He doesn't normally act like this. So when he does, you need to pay attention. So hopefully they can get things worked out. Atwood's had such an up and down start to the campaign, but it does help that we're heading to Belltown next week. He won this race a year ago. That was his most recent cup win to date, was Belltown last year. So there's a very good chance he could win again, especially with the new pit crew. We'll have to see how the new crew chief works, but yeah, I think the changes were necessary. I know it's tough, always tough breaking up a championship winning crew chief from his driver, but it needed to be done. I think in this situation, it had to be done, and we'll see. We'll keep a close eye on that 17 team, kind of middling in the point standings right now. And if they want to make a serious title push, they got, especially with Michigan coming up next, that doubleheader, Atwood's really going to struggle there. He traditionally does. So they have to come out and get a huge result at Belltown. Otherwise, I would say their title hopes are pretty much over at this point. So we'll see if the changes end up working for CJ Barrymore Racing. I can never say that name properly. CJ Barrymore Racing. Finally, yeah, got that done. But moving on to a driver that Atwood was fuming with, ironically enough, in the Craftsman race. Oh boy, Caden Dunham. Now, when I tell you that this kid is probably the most raw talent I've ever seen in while covering the ASCA, like I wasn't around when Diego Urquidy and Nick Urquidy when they were young drivers. I wasn't around when Randall Woods was a young driver. I've only been covering this sport since 2019. So, I did get to see Laquan Scranton kind of come up through the ranks. And obviously he was incredibly controversial. He was incredibly raw, rough around the edges, needed some developing and polishing and cleaning up his abilities, adding some racecraft. But I think that he was even more polished as a prospect, maybe not off the track, but on the track, he most certainly was, than Caden Dunham. This kid, you can see visually, you can see the talent is there. The things that he does in a race car should not be possible for a kid that's only 18 years old. Like he the stuff he can do, getting in the throttle, when you actually look at the telemetry, you look at the throttle tracing, and you see how early he's able to get on the throttle in some of these corners, how late he's able to get on the brakes in other instances, especially when you look at that Streets of Computerville telemetry, that data, watching it back, it's magical. Watching the way he maneuvered the brakes and getting on the throttle, like it's insane looking at the throttle tracing from that. And even, at Orlando, it's kind of the same deal. He takes him 3 wide at the start of the race, goes around the outside of Travis Wolf. Like that shouldn't be possible. Like you see the flashes, you see the highs of Caden Dunham, but then you see him take out half the field. And it's like, oh my God, what the heck is this kid doing? He obviously took out Tony Novell, and that, you know, caused a chain reaction, took out Atwood, took out Reynard, lap car Caleb Moore. Um, then he runs what's his name? Matt Chamberlain, the points leader, up the track for the second position, takes that spot, and then he ends up dumping Will Moon to take the race lead, and obviously goes on to win the race. So, obviously a lot of people were frustrated. A lot of people called for him to be suspended. And I understand why people called for him to be parked, all this and that. They were actually booing him at his home track. The police had to escort him to victory lane. That's how bad it was. So many people wanted a piece of him after the race, and not in a good way. So here's the deal for this. Should the ASCA sanction him? No. And why do I say this? We're heading to Belltown next week. The drivers are going to sanction him next week. I can promise you that. If there's anyone within of the vicinity of the number 98, he's getting punted, he's getting sent, he's getting body slammed. Like that is the best place to go if you want to get revenge is Belltown. Um, other than probably San Diego might be even better, but I would say Belltown honestly, especially with that traction agent applied on the bottom lane. You want to root and gouge someone out of the bottom line, pull off a good old fashioned bump and run, do it at Belltown. So with Caden Dunham, better hope that he wins pole and he leads every lap and he's far away from anyone because if he's anywhere near a driver, he is getting body slammed, he's getting doored, he's getting bumped, he's probably gonna get dumped at some point. The drivers are going to sanction him. That's why I think the ASC actually made the right decision to not get involved. Now I do think that they probably should have parked him. He should not have won that race. Um, that I think the ASC fumbled the bag there. He should have been parked. You can't wreck three different drivers and just let a dude get away with that. So I think that Bob Halper did take an L right there. Like you have to kind of set a precedent, especially for a guy that's only in his sixth start. That hey, this isn't acceptable. You can't be bullying guys like this. Like at what point you obviously want to say that Rubbin's racing, you don't want to kind of police things like they do in racing, handing out 5-second penalties. But at what point do you say enough is enough? Like we can't let him, bully everyone off the racetrack. So, but like I said, since they didn't park him, don't sanction him. The drivers will sanction him, and I think that the drivers sanctioning him, especially for a guy like Kane Dunn who does not care about what anyone thinks about him. He doesn't even care what his own spotter thinks about him. His spotter told him, "Hey, stop running people up the track," and he basically told his spotter to shut up. That's the PG version of it because it was a lot more brutal than that if you hear the team communications. But yeah, this is a kid who thinks he's better than everyone else, who thinks his crap doesn't stink. You know, he he reminds me a lot of Laquan in that aspect, but also much more raw than Laquan because Laquan had his moments, but you wouldn't see him flat out dump people unless he absolutely had to. Dunham just dumps people for the heck of it. Like, hey, I need to get by this dude. I'm faster than him, but I don't feel like passing him cleanly. So you know what? I'm just gonna take him out. That that I think the drivers need to take it into their own hands and kind of just let them know, like, hey, you know, this kind of racing is not acceptable. And if you think it's acceptable, there will be consequences to your actions. So that's what I think should happen with Dunham. And yeah, Belltown, that Craftsman race is going to be must see TV. I know a lot of people want to see that 98 in the wall on a record. And I'm sure they're probably going to get their wish here Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But moving on, let's briefly cover silly season. Will Moon. This was the only big talking point of the week, other than Cameron Atwood and the 17 team making wholesale changes. But Will Moon is leaving Ronnie Woods Motorsports at the end of the season. It's a mutual parting of ways between driver and team. Moon's been there for the past 3 years. He's been in the RWM farm system, though, for the past 4. He spent his rookie year at South Point Racing, and he kind of wants to go out and stretch his wings. And he's expressed a desire to race in the Cup Series. I don't know where, but he knew that he didn't have a chance at Ronnie Woods Motorsports, not within the foreseeable future. Now, they do have Shane Park and Colin Ward's contracts expiring after the 2027 season. We'll have to see how that develops for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, but there's no openings within the foreseeable future, not until at least minimum 2028. So he knew that if he wanted to race in Cup, he needed to, go somewhere else where there would be an opening. So that's what he's doing. And I and for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, it's an opportunity to get one of their young talents in there. I don't know if many of you have heard the name Garrett Hood. That's ASC Hall of Famer Jimmy Hood's son, and obviously there's going to be a lot of hype surrounding him. He turns 18 next year, so um, it'd be the perfect time to get him in a seat. They also did recently sign newly minted ASC next member Chandler Mills. He's another four-star prospect. A lot of hype surrounding him. We'll see if he gets a seat. So there's gonna be some interesting just decisions between Moon and not Moon. Moon is obviously out the door, but Hood or Mills, who ends up getting the seat, I would say that obviously Hood, based on name recognition alone, would get it. But who knows? We'll see on that one. But where does Will Moon land? So we know we just talked about where Ronnie Woods Motorsports will go next. They're gonna have no trouble replacing him basically, and which is right. Why it's a mutual parting of ways. Like Moon's been a solid driver, but he's mid. Let's be honest, he's mid. He's not great. He's not terrible though. He obviously won a race last season, but he has yet to take that next step, and he doesn't. He clearly does not have the potential that a Matt Chamberlain has in the same equipment. So where does he land? I don't know, to be honest with you. Like it's a tough deal. Maybe if he wants a cup ride so badly, I mean, Chico Bound Motorsports is probably going to have an opening in a 10 car. He could go there. Um, Students Enterprises could be an option. If they're looking for a short term bridge option, we'll have to see. CJ Burner Racing has an option, but I suspect that they're probably going to stay with the Ford guy, um, especially with the recent potential that we've seen out of a Caden Dunham. Who knows? Maybe Sean Wooden could make a potential return to Cup, but I don't know. So it's a tough situation for Will Moon, but um, I think that maybe he can find something. It it's interesting. So I don't know where he's gonna land, but I do respect him, taking his chances and trying to find something at the top level, taking a risk, because sometimes that's all it takes. You gotta take risks to, get to the top level of sport. Every driver does in their development. So I respect Will Moon for doing that. He kind of knows he's stagnant where he's at. He wants to get out. He wants to stretch his wings. We'll see how it works out. But he, considering he is a mid series regular, I think that he is going to have probably a harder time finding a cup ride than, let's say, a Matt Chamberlain if he pulled a move like this. But finally, final topic of discussion this week, it's Belltown week. An early season annual preview of what we'll see in the season finale in June, the day weekend here in Belltown. Man, this track, especially since they renovated it and went through with that $10 million in renovations, put up the softer walls, put the traction aids in, specifically the traction aids in, on the bottom of the racetrack. That was a genius move by them. Um, the racing there has been outstanding. It's more, it's I wouldn't say a crapshoot, but it's been very, we'll put it unpredictable. Greg Healy had obviously been dominant here, and when the track, first went through its renovations, he was still very dominant here. He won 3 out of the first 4 races here. But last year we saw Cameron Atwood win, we saw Braeden Bennett win. So obviously those 3 are clearly, when we head to a short track, those 3 are going to be your favorites, right? But I also think that a guy like a Todd Kidd, who's won here twice, he won here in 2024. I think he could very well be a contender. Norm Lester, very up and down this season, more so down as of late, 17th in points. Big opportunity for him to kind of bounce back and recover. Same situation for Doug Bowden, who was up inside the top 3 before blowing an engine. This is probably his best track as well. He's going to be up there. Marcus Edwards, he's a dark horse candidate for this race weekend. Keep an eye on him as well. He finished 5th here last year. I think he did win a Craftsman race here in 2023, way back when. So keep an eye on him as well. I think that again, dark horse threat, he could win. Maybe it could be an opportunity for him to score his first. Who knows? But we'll start by previewing the Craftsman race as well. Um, so we have it's a packed house of leeches. Like the field of Cup drivers in this race is star-studded. You've got Marcus Edwards, you've got Doug Bowden, you've got Braeden Bennett, and you've got Cameron Atwood. So good luck, series regulars, getting around those four. Between those four, if I had to give the nod to anyone, of course I'm going to give it to Bennett. He's been red hot as of late. So yeah, Bennett. But I also think that Cameron Atwood, obviously he's still kind of fuming after what happened, but he did win this race a year ago, pull off the weekend sweep. So, it's not out of the question that he could get the job done. Definitely don't count out a former Cup Series champion and don't count out Marcus Edwards and Doug Bowden as well. The problem for them is just normally they're just way too over aggressive and don't even finish the race. So I think that one of those four is obviously going to win. If I had to pick anyone, it'd be Bennett. But yeah, so I got Bennett winning the Craftsman race. Then for the Cup race, well, I guess they're going to pick Braeden Bennett again because why not? I mean, you see his 1.33 average finish in his last three starts. He's been outstanding as of late. We know the run he went on during this stretch of races last season. He's obviously won back-to-back Cup starts. He just drove from 19th to second in 85 laps last week. I don't see how you can't pick Braeden Bennett right now, especially at a track like this when he's won three out of the last five short track races and has finished no worse than third. Like you can't pick against this guy. Although, like I said, if there's anyone who could challenge him, I think Greg Healy has the best chance. But also Cameron Atwood, I think he's going to be a factor as well. As long as his pit crew doesn't sell for the 50 millionth time and cost him an opportunity to reach victory lane. But yeah, that's it for this edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, signing out. And boy, I can guarantee you there's going to be some more drama and controversy when we come back and recap Belltown in a week's time.